Thank you all for coming here. Glad to see everyone's faces. I almost didn't make it. I had some trials and tribulations this week, but thankfully I'm enough on my pins now that I could be here and see everybody. So again, thank you. So this, just a little background on me. I started out with micros back in the late 70s. You know, like a lot of people, it was a thing for me. It was fun, led to my career in IT, but you know, I never kept my old stuff. And about 20 years ago, when I dug some things up with my son, it got me interested again. And so now I'm back in the swing of things, especially being part of VCF, which I have been for about the last 15 years. But a lot of what we see, you know, personally and as part of the museum, we have people donating things to us all the time, which is great. But we get a lot of calls too from people saying, you know, unfortunately, my father, my uncle, my sister, my whoever, unfortunately passed, and they have this big collection of stuff. We have no idea what to do with it. So it's you know, it's leads to a lot of questions, and you know, somebody who does collecting, it leads to a little soul searching. So back in 2018, I decided, well, you know what? Let's maybe talk about this a little bit. We'll find a little common ground and maybe give some tips here, some life lessons on, you know, what we found and maybe some ways to manage this and get ahead of, you know, what's a fun hobby, but what can become an issue. And it's not just computers, right? It could be anything. So I've updated this since 2018. You know, hopefully it's a little more helpful. And I'd like to make it a little interactive. So if there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me, and we can go from there. So before you start collecting, which I imagine most people here probably have already have a collection of some point, so this might be a academic question, but it's important to kind of think about what your goals are. Right? Are you doing it for fun or nostalgia? And I do talk to a lot of people who are thinking of buying a vintage computer, and I ask them the reason why. And if the reason is, oh, you know, I'm just curious about it. I had a lot of fun with it when I was a kid. Okay, great. Download an emulator. Go play with it. See how much of that nostalgia stays with you after you play with it. And if you really do love it, well, I'd say even then, depending on the system, consider a modern replica instead of buying original hardware. It can be cheaper, and it's a lot easier to use because they can hook up to modern displays and sound. It just kind of keeps people from going down, you know, the wrong path if they don't have the ability or the desire to maintain vintage equipment. Can save a lot of frustration. So that's just what I recommend to people. The reason you start a collection could be academic. Maybe you're really interested in history and preserving things. And I know we have people in this room that I see that's what they do, which is wonderful. It's a good reason. Some people just like to have things, you know, restored so they can showcase them. Great, good. Bring your exhibit to VCF East. Love it. People, and you know, some of it is too, people, they grow their collections and they amass a lot of stuff and fix it and sell it to support their hobby. Again, great. You thin out your surplus, you support yourself financially with it. But there's a couple of caveats there, right? Flipping for profit, it's not a very popular thing with our crowd, and it's speculative. You spend a lot of time and money and maybe not get what you think that you're going to. I have the example there. No, that Timex Sinclair 1000 you found isn't worth $1,000. You see that a lot, unfortunately. People think they struck gold because they found something at a garage sale. And again, like I said, it can create a lack of goodwill in the collecting community.
Well, I'll go into that part a little later about when you actually do have gold and the family doesn't know that.
That's a very, very good point. That's the other side of that. So the last one is that I have here is the reason for starting collecting just to collect. This, unfortunately, can lead down the rabbit hole of hoarding, which, a lot of us, we laugh about and make fun, but it's, again, in my personal experience, I've seen some sad things. I've gone to a lot of estate sales and gone to, places where I've been called and, say, hey, can you come and look at this stuff? And it's, it can be a little upsetting sometimes. It's great that we were able to get the opportunity to go and rescue things, but at the same time, there's a human side to it that, it stops and makes you think. The famous last words. Oh, this one last thing. I'm just going to get this one last piece, and that's it. It's never the one last piece, so just got to consider that. So there's types of collections. People have, they like all kinds of different things. Some people only like stuff made in certain eras. Great. 70s micros are my favorite, 80s micros to an extent. Once you start getting the 16-bit era, even I start to lose a little interest, but that's just me. But everybody's got their thing. Theme collecting. Some people just like game machines. Some people like machines that were made for certain industries. Awesome. Another good kind of theme. Kind of nice to stick to a theme too, because it tends to keep your collection kind of containerized instead of everything and anything. Like that was me for a while. Anything that had to do with vintage computing, I didn't care what it was. I had to have it. Vendor-specific collecting, that's great too. Some people big Atari fans, Commodore 64 fans, Apple fans, whatever. It's again, that'll help containerize your interest, and it actually kind of makes it more interesting too. You become a subject matter expert in that area. Some people collect types of technology. Some people want every single system with a Z80 chip in it, or a 6502 in it. Great. People might even collect by a bus type, S100 systems, right? Or you could just focus on some things that are rare or distinctive, which some people do. Again, it's anything to focus your interest. Or you could focus on computer types, right? Micros, mainframes. Some people love, my son loves anything portable. He'll collect anything portable. Single board computers are a lot of fun as well because you can tinker with them. Again, the form factors, right? Handle portable all-in-ones, etc. Some people love laptops. I see like a lot of people now are laptop collectors. Good for them. It's hard enough to work on machines. Laptops are a bear. And I end up breaking half of them when I open them up anyway. And some people even collect peripherals. I stop short of that except for CRTs, just because I like the look and the feel and the fact that I want to preserve them because they're, once they die, for the most part, they're going to be gone. Believe it or not, some people like printers.
Actually, let me just interrupt.
Yo, please.
So, did anybody notice the street sign on for Brighton?
Yeah, there's a big letter that G was doing the rest of the printing.
Is that bigger? What does it not do?
Well, that's what all I noticed. I was driving by, I wasn't steering.
All right. Anybody notice? It doesn't descend. Oh, sorry. The G on the Brighton sign doesn't descend.
Oh.
It's like a TRS-81. Like, yeah, like what? Was that, does anyone know if that's deliberate?
It looked like it was bigger than the rest of the type.
Well, no, it's a lowercase, but because it doesn't descend, it's shoved up. It's the same typeface. And I've never seen it on a street sign in my life. I mean, I'm 55 years old, and I've never seen a non-descending G on a street sign in my entire life. So it was just weird that it's literally 50 feet from here. But anyway.
So the only comment I can make on that is working for a publishing company for years and knowing something a little about typesetting. Whoever did it didn't align. So normally what you do when you lay out type like that is you set up your guidelines. Yeah. They set the guidelines up on top instead of in the middle to align the lowercase letters. But no, hold on.
All right. But no, I just wanted to bring that up because I'd literally never seen that before, and being next to a retro computer museum and it looking like an Epson LX80 printer printed it, just made me think of it.
Yeah, that just never occurred to me. Now you say it, I remember it now. Wow. That's appropriate for the area. So, getting help and info, right? Fortunately, these days, the hobby's a lot bigger than it used to be. There's a lot of resources, news groups, forums, websites, mailing lists, right? A lot of that, especially now with the internet. Thankfully, back in the 70s and 80s, we relied on magazines and books, and if we were lucky enough to have a modem, right, we could dial into BBSs, but so much more information now. Oh, CompuServe forums too, which was a lot of fun. Obviously, clubs, user groups, workshops, VCF talks. VCF has workshops usually every month, very helpful. And you can bring your stuff and get help on repairing it, restoring it. And there's places all over the country. Obviously, museums are a big help, no matter where you are. If you find a computer museum, a lot of times even if they don't do things like VCF does, you'll find people there willing to talk to you and help you out.
Oh, put a pin in that. I have some comments about computer museums.
Okay, oh, great. And then, obviously, knowledgeable friends are also a big help, right? The community is very important. One of the things I always say is, and I'll mention that here, is if you're getting into the hobby, tell people about it. Tell everyone you know. Tell your coworkers. Tell your friends. People at work knew that I was into this. Now every once in a while, I'll come into work and I'll have a box on my desk with a little surprise in it, and people dig up. I don't know what to do with this. Oh, give it to him. He collects that stuff. Great. All right. Mystery prize. Every once in a while. So it's actually worth it. People might think you're obnoxious, but hey, it'll get you stuff. So some of the things that are very important, right, that you should keep in mind starting a collection. Think about what's going to go into it, what's going to be required to add some sanity to the process. Very important, get ahead of keeping track of what you have. Because once you have a big pile of stuff, it's very daunting to look at it and say, okay, where do I start? How do I start cataloging this? And, I don't remember what I spent for it. I don't remember where I got it. A lot of these things are very important. Like in the museum, obviously, here at VCF, we definitely catalog all this stuff. It's very important where it came from, when, even the everything about the provenance, how it was used. Don't discount that even for your own personal collections. It's very important information. Technology is great. I love it. It's very cool. But to me, the best part of technology is what it can be used for, what it can do, right? Becky knows that better than anybody, right? It's great. So, try to, right from the get-go, if you have a good habit of documenting what you have as much as possible, you'll be happy for it in the end. However you can do it. Use a spreadsheet, use a database, whatever it is. Descriptions, photos, what you paid for it, provenance, if you can get it, very important, especially if you're going to donate it later. Museums love to know the provenance of the items. It takes time, but again, right, better for everyone. The other thing willing to do repairs. If you don't want to pay top dollars for stuff that's already working. And the problem is, unless you're seeing stuff right in your face, you're buying stuff on eBay, people claim whatever they want. Oh, it's fully working, it's great, it's perfect. You get it, something's wrong, more often than not. So it's kind of important to keep in mind that basic knowledge of electronics and of electricity in general, if you have no exposure to that, just so you don't hurt yourself or set fires.
So let me just jump in here really quick. As a lawyer who's actually seen these things happen, inside your standard CRT monitor from the 70s and through the 90s, if you don't know what you're doing in there, it can kill you. I am not joking. The voltages in there do kill people if they're not careful. So if you can play with any piece of hardware you want, your IBM 5150, replacing the bells on the floppy drive, fine. The monitor for the 5150, if you sit behind someone and make sure you learn from them when you start monkeying around with those CRTs, because those voltages can kill you. So just that, I don't want to be doing your probate 8 years from now because you stuck your hand in a monitor where you shouldn't be sticking your hand. So, all right.
Yeah, no, no, it really is a good tip. Yeah,
Rant off.
That stings a little bit. Yeah, it's a good point, especially with CRTs, right? Plastic adjustment tools, working on a CRT, and the old trick of, you working on high voltage stuff, keep one hand behind your back, right? Because it hurts to get shocked, but it can kill you to have an arc come across your heart, right? So that's the one trick that they taught us back in, EE school. But anyway, yeah, even just basic knowledge, just at least you know what not to do. That's at least as important as knowing what to do. Having, like I said, the appropriate tools. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but, maybe do a little research online, see, make sure that you're spending your money wisely. You don't need the best stuff, just, kind of know what you're getting into and what's appropriate. Maybe having some spare components. You'll start to learn after a while what the kind of spare parts you need to have around. Maybe you don't need 10 C64s for spare parts. Maybe you only need 3, right? Which is kind of like my rule of thumb, but I know it's nice to you think, oh, I saw one at a garage sale for $25. I can use it as a spare. Do you really need 12 of them sitting in your closet? After a while, you just gotta, hard to say no, but you gotta do it. Electrical multimeter, important. Maybe an ESR meter, check capacitors. There's machines of a certain era. Unfortunately, it was the early 90s, I think, where we had a spate of really bad caps that a lot of equipment from that era needs to be recapped. Having schematics and documentations resources is very important. But again, right, we live in the age of the internet. A lot easier to do now than it used to be.
Al with Bit Savers doing God's work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, 100%. And, a little more advanced, but if you get into it, getting a logic probe and an oscilloscope will really help you do some advanced repairs. So, but again, you don't have to do all that, just some tips. And very important point here, make sure you create space. This is how you get into situations where you get into spousal arguments and things like that, or just get into a hoarding situation. What do you want to do with the space? Do you want your stuff to be viewable? Do you want it to be usable and viewable? It's going to really, it makes a difference on how you're going to configure your space and how much you're going to want to put aside. You're going to want some bulk storage space too for your spares and for things that maybe aren't working or dirty that you haven't gotten to yet. And you really want to make sure that when you store your stuff, it's up off the ground. Even if it's in what you think is a safe place. You never know when you're going to have a pipe break or somebody spills something, or believe me, been through it all.
So anybody who watches the channel LGR on YouTube?
Yeah, the tree line's house.
The hurricane demolished his house and wiped out a good chunk of his collection, just destroyed it all. Because the roof went off and flooded it all out. So, and he has a lot of stuff that was unique and might not have been valuable, but it was like, sorry, I have my arm over it. Sorry, thank you. Yeah, he had a lot of stuff destroyed in the hurricane last year because it tore the roof off his house and flooded the room that a lot of his stuff was in. And some of that stuff, yeah, it's probably maybe replaceable, but he had some really odd and weird things that were sold in limited quantities, in the 90s, and they're gone. So be very careful where you put stuff, and you can somewhat mitigate it by putting it above the ground. So if you have a pipe break or a flood, depending on where you live, it will not get destroyed. Now, electronics can do a little bit of water. You can wash a circuit board, but like flooding, where it sits underwater for a while, it's usually junked. So.
I keep my collection, a lot of my things in what they call really useful boxes. They're sealed plastic boxes, so that if my house is flooded, there's a high percentage chance it will not get wet.
Nice. Yeah, plastics, and that's one thing I neglected to put on this list is absolutely, thank you for that. Plastics.
Plastic boxes.
Sealed plastic box, yeah, not just ones that snap closed. The water will infiltrate those. You can get ones that actually seal watertight. So that's very important. Yeah, short of a biblical flood, it should keep your stuff dry.
I was on a hill, so I got that covered.
And if your house is on pontoons, even better, right? Just stay above the water
If
line.
the house floods, the state of Texas is in worse trouble, and I got things to worry about.
True, very true. If you have the room, I highly recommend setting up some kind, no matter how big, even if it's only as big as this podium, some kind of workspace that's dedicated, because otherwise what happens is you start having stuff sprawl everywhere. And again, you want to avoid domestic arguments, right? Whether it's a spouse or a significant other or a roommate even, right? It gets out of hand really quick. So brings me to the last point. Do you have this big thing to consider? Do you have the space not to look like a hoarder and annoy your family, friends, roommates, whoever it might be? It's sometimes you just don't think about these things, and all of a sudden, my wife, I think I do a pretty decent job of keeping things under control. Maybe once in a while I get a look, but then I look at her book collection. So, and I'm just as bad. I love books too, so I get it. But again, it could be anything. So, more about what are you willing to do? So we're going to talk about keep maintenance and repairs. What I have there maybe is a little too small to see. It's a can of WD-40. Please don't use this to lubricate parts. It's more of a water displacer. It's really not meant to lubricate computer parts. It's good for certain things, for what it's good for, but not that. So when you're cleaning or restoring these old machines, keep in mind the plastics get brittle, and because they're old, they do get discolored, and you can so-called retrobrate stuff, which I'm sure everybody's heard the term. Personally, I don't think you have to go nuts retrobrating. I've had a lot of luck just leaving things out in the sun untreated and brighten up. To me, the first step is always cleaning. A lot of times you clean stuff and you wouldn't believe what comes up. Just be careful if you're going to use something like a magic eraser, which is basically just puffed mica, the mineral. It actually scrapes away a lot of material, so be cautious. Which leads me to the next point about marks of provenance. Who hasn't seen like an Apple II with university or whatever written on the side and marker or with a property tag on it? Yeah, maybe you want to take that off, but maybe you don't. Sometimes that's a mark of provenance. Sometimes that's cool to have. Think about it. Take a balance of where this came from versus what damage might I do if I try to remove it. Sometimes, especially the tags are made with glue that is just kind of melts into the plastic, and if you remove it, it's going to be worse. So you might just want to think about leaving certain things. Again, with retrobrate, be cautious. A lot of people say use high volume peroxide like they use, like you can get from hair salons. Very caustic. You can really damage yourself with this stuff, so be very careful. Again, personally, I don't think it's 100% necessary for a lot of things. Sun, maybe even just regular grade hydrogen peroxide that does the job. Canned air is always good. Safe cleaning products, right? Not everything's safe. Alcohol is great for cleaning certain things. You might even go as far as to want to use acetone for certain things to get, if they're really sticky, if you've got like glue residue, but just be careful. Acetone can turn plastic into goo instantly. Yeah, you want to be careful. And then you don't want to get that miasma of toxic mix on your skin either. Not good. So cleaning products, like a lot of time, Windex works great. I know Corey Cohen, who's a big part of our group here, for years he's advocated baby wipes. Awesome. That's my first line of cleaning, always. They don't damage anything. They have just enough detergent in them to get off dirt, and they have that nice little fiber to them. A little bit of elbow grease and a baby wipe, 9 times out of 10, it's all you need. Sometimes a rust mitigation might be a great idea, especially if you have machines that have big metal backplanes. If they're rusty, rust begets rust. So you really want to put a stop to it. Try to get it off. Very light sandpaper. If you have to use something like a rust remover, make sure you remove the metal from whatever you're working on and do that separately. But yeah, getting rid of rust is important if you can. And again, proper safe lubricants, no WD-40, please. Teflon grease is good for certain things. I'm sorry? Clock oil, sewing machine oil. It's very, very lightweight, especially for things like old printers where the head rail. It's really good for that. Now, I'm going to make a last note about that on disk drive rails. There's a big bone of contention with that. Most of the time, they do not need to be lubricated. They don't come from the factory. They didn't come from the factory lubricated. They just don't need anything. If they feel like they're sticky, need anything at all, clean them. Tiniest bit of graphite, maybe, with, as a light lube. Just make sure that graphite's very conductive. Make sure it doesn't get anything else. Or again, just the micro drop of sewing machine oil. But I find most of the time, if the rail's clean, it doesn't call for lubrication. The other thing too, especially with floppy drives, is the last thing you want is any excess lubricant getting onto your disk media, because that'll destroy it pretty quickly. So as far as restoration goes, if you're not a stickler for authenticity, you can get 3D parts now, molded, instead of taking from spare parts. There's certain computers that were painted, and you're not looking at what the color of the plastic it was molded in, so you can repaint certain machines. You might want to think about if you're going to do any kind of modding. Modding's great because they can give you some maybe video outputs that weren't available originally or audio outputs, but sometimes they might need alterations to the case, so you really want to think about it if you really want to do that. You want to weigh the value of the mod versus the permanent change you're going to make to the case. I'm a big fan of using modern replacements for mechanical things. SCSI to SDs are fantastic for restoring old Macs and Sun machines and things like that. GoTech drives for replacing floppy drives, fantastic. XT IDEs, I wouldn't have an old PC without one. FujiNet, which is a big theme of ours the last couple of years. To me, FujiNet's one of the greatest things ever, because not only does it gives you connection to the internet via Wi-Fi, gives you virtual drive slots, gives you local storage, printing emulation. It exposes the I/O over the internet to the machine's BASIC, so you can actually write BASIC programs, native BASIC, that can talk over the internet to other machines and to servers. It's fantastic. To me, the FujiNet is bringing these old 8-bit micros into the 21st century, and I noticed that it's really reigniting a lot of interest in some of these platforms. It brings it back to life. So big fan of FujiNets. I recommend them if you haven't tried one already. Along the same line, Wi-Fi modems, great. Stick them in a serial port. Send Haze AT commands out to it. Connect the things. A few years ago, I finally got my, one of my white whales was finding a really nice VT102 terminal in nice shape, but for not stupid money. And I finally was able to get one. First thing I did was plug a Wi-Fi modem in a serial port and telnet to a VAX system and load up Colossal Cave. Of course, because that's what you do, right, if you have a VT terminal. So yeah, I couldn't have done that so quickly if I had to connect it to one of my systems. So really great. And of course, for machines with cartridge ports, multi-carts are nice too. It's just anything to save wear and tear on vintage mechanical parts like floppy drives. So the fun part, acquisition, right? So for me, I didn't really start getting back into this until I uncovered some of the stuff I already had. I was unpacking some old boxes with my son when he was little, and we found one of my old Atari 7800s. Like, oh, this is fun. Great, I set it up, he loved it. I saw his eyes light up. I'm like, wow, this is an old system, and he's got all the latest games. He liked this. We kept digging, we found more stuff. So, that started that started a big mess, but anyway. That's why we're having this talk now. Yeah, but again, I always highly recommend, look at the stuff you might already have. Then, after that, again, like I said before, it's great, just tell everybody you know, hey, I'm into this hobby, you have anything laying around, let me know, you know anybody, awesome. Forums, mailing list news groups as usual. I'm a big fan of garage sales and estate sales, not only because I find stuff, but it's kind of a fun thing to do on weekends anyway. The family, we do it as a family, and we find things. You never know what you're gonna get. Found some amazing things. A fun one was last fall. There was a estate sale literally 3 blocks from my house. And I went in, we looked around, not much. I got back in my car, started driving back home. And I asked my wife, wait, did you go upstairs and look? No. Did a 360, went back. I went up the stairs. There was a TRS-80 Model 3 laying on the carpet in one of the rooms. I just like, really? Like, wow, okay. Right in my arms, $30, home. A little bit of futzing, got it working. So, rescued a Model 3. I didn't need it, but for that price, somebody here eventually is going to get it for a bargain. Somebody that'll give it a good home. It's just the way I look at it. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Flea markets, Hamfest, the VCF consignment and swap meets. Great place to find stuff. And coincidentally, offload stuff you don't need. Storage locker sales and auctions, a little more speculative, but if that's the kind of thing you like, great. I wouldn't do it, but you can get some bargains there. Recycling centers used to be a great place. These days, I notice a lot of them are cracking down. I used to get a lot of good stuff out of my local recycling center, and then they pretty much put the hammer down, and that's it. No more foraging for a bunch of reasons, but it's too bad. Retail recycling centers, they put ridiculous prices on the stuff that they pull out of the recycling piles, so kind of sad. Towns that have bulk garbage pickup days are great. If you go, you drive around town. Unlike normal garbage picking, which you're not supposed to do, when there's bulk pickup days, you're allowed to go by and pick things up off the curb. So again, I found some amazing things. I found some really nice CRTs that way. But again, even with that, check the local ordinances in the towns you're going to go to. Make sure that they're okay with people driving around picking stuff up off the curb.
One thing to add to that, so there's a YouTube channel called The Serial Port, and they went to a bowling alley liquidation in Durham, North Carolina, and picked up a deck 525 terminal for $1.
Nice.
Because people that go to bowling alley liquidations are looking for bowling equipment and have no idea what they're looking at when they see a deck terminal that's been around for 40 years, and it's sold for $1.
Yeah, you just never know. That's a good point, because just because a venue says one thing doesn't mean there's not going to be something of interest for you. I was in an antique shop in Somerville a few months ago, and there was an Osborne executive in the window. Like, wait, what? I did a double take. Went right back in. It's apparently had the box and documentation, everything, very well preserved, beautiful shape. So so that's sitting in my collection right now. And I haven't bought an Osborne before that. I always held off, so I'm kind of glad I did. And who'd have thought, an antique shop? But more stuff. Retail websites or storefronts. Thrift shops used to be a great place, but again, they've kind of caught on to the hobby. They're raising their prices.
Goodwill.
Goodwill, yeah.
They now look stuff up on eBay to know what they have before they throw it out there for $5 and not even think about it.
Yeah, that being said though, if you're at one, it's still kind of worth it to look sometimes, because once in a while, they'll just stick a price tag on something and not look it up because they won't know what it is. So it's rare now, but you never know. Antique consignment shops, right? Like I just said, my story. And retro video game stores. Sometimes they'll get somebody trading, that'll give them old computer equipment. I've picked up a Tandy 1000 at a retro video game shop in Pittsburgh. They didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to sell it, so I bought it off of them. It was great. So another good place to look. And then again, like I mentioned, just ask, talk to people. You'd be surprised how far you get. You'd think that we really wouldn't go anywhere, but people listen. If they find something that's sitting around, and instead of throwing it out, they'd rather give it to you. Great.
Yeah, one thing so if you see something on eBay, check the seller's other items. I actually picked up a Unix PC, AT&T Unix PC, because this person in Brooklyn bought it from like an estate where they bought they had like vintage clothes. So you look at their eBay listing and it's all like Donna Karan and all this stuff. Then you see this Unix PC and you're like, wait, what? So you make it, and they didn't know what to do with it. They listed it for this stupid high price. So I said, okay, fine. Here's a fair price for it. You can check the sales. I'll come by and get it. I'm in Jersey City. I can hop over there in 20 minutes. And I bought it. So, because she had no idea what she had. She could price a leather jacket from 3 blocks away, but that Unix PC sitting 5 feet in front of her looks like, something out of War Games. So.
Yeah, exactly. You just don't know. Never assume. Yeah, and the last thing is, you might want to build an information network. There's somebody who's very notorious on Facebook who has a network of people that work for him around the country, picking up stuff, and he's built a giant collection that way. So it's never underestimate the power of having an information network. More on it. Online. Ugh. eBay, Craigslist, I know. Facebook, classifieds. But, once in a while you pick up a gem. I don't bother going far away to pick things up unless it's something I really, really, really want or need. But once in a while, I'll see something locally that's worth having for a good price. So I look casually. But, if you're going to buy something sight unseen, have it shipped, everyone knows the perils of that. The stuff's, again, it's old, it's fragile. If I'm buying something I think is fragile from someone and I'm paying them to ship it, I will offer them extra money to ship it the way I want it shipped. I like certain things that are fragile. I want them double boxed. I want them padded the proper way.
And something with like CRTs, I would actually consider sending a box that's already like packed with with the form of the CRT. So all they do is basically put the CRT in, so it's already form filled, and so they can mail it back to you, because CRTs get damaged in shipping all the time. They're very fragile with that.
Yeah, and that being said, even that stuff was great when it was new. Again, brittle plastic. Even with the original packaging, the shock of a drop can make the internals crack. So that's why a lot of times I'll insist on double boxing.
Okay. So,
And anything I ship, I double box.
One trick with shipping stuff, right on the outside of the box, paint inside. Anybody know why?
Because then they'll actually put it right side up.
No, no. So the employees of FedEx and UPS and all those delivery shipping services all have horror stories of a paint delivery that broke open in transit. And they cause such a mess that it's almost like, trial by fire, where it's like something in their life they never forget. So a trick to make them handle that box like it's a baby is to put paint inside on the outside, because they will handle it so gingerly, because they do not want to bust it and spill paint on the floor. No joke. As someone, my nephew works at FedEx, and he said that they literally special carry those boxes. So if it's something fragile, stick on the outside, paint inside. and it'll be treated with gloves, with kid gloves.
That's a great tip. I never thought of that. I'm doing that from now on. Wow, who knew? About buying remotely, again, if you want to see if you're getting a decent price for something, usually tell people, like, look through eBay sold listings and look at enough of them so you can get a decent idea. That'll give you a kind of fair idea if you're paying too much for something or if you're finding a bargain. And cautions about buying things, right? Misrepresentation's a big problem, especially on Facebook now. You're seeing a lot of scams where people are stealing other people's photos and presenting them as items for sale.
What was the one, the Commodore in Brooklyn? That was the
There
Seattle.
was one recently, yeah.
So we just ran across this, the VCF members. Somebody had copied the photos from a Seattle eBay listing and literally with the serial number visible, and they posted it for sale in Brooklyn on Craigslist. And like, how did this thing like teleport?
Right.
But it was a very valuable, like this rare Commodore 64 Silver Edition, whatever that is. And like, they said, just send me the money and I'll mail it to you.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right away.
So be very, very careful and do a reverse image search, and it will come right up where they got the images from, almost all the time.
Yeah, the good news is that people are getting a lot better at spotting these now. So if you belong to any enthusiast groups on Facebook, you usually see scam warnings pop up, and pay heed. Definitely take a look, and again, the usual cautions about how you're paying. Don't use any payment method where you don't have recourse for a refund if something doesn't get shipped. People insist on certain methods of payment, it's a red flag, just walk away. I don't care how good the thing looks. Hidden damage, another thing you want to be careful of, but how much of that can you do remotely? I don't know. It's something to keep in mind. Proper methods of shipping, as we spoke about, and it's worth asking people, right? I've offended some people by asking them to ship things a certain way, but I've gotten too many vintage items destroyed, and it's a shame. It's not just, look, I know I'm getting my money back, but it makes me cry, seeing this vintage item that's it, it's gone forever. Can never be replaced, and it's done. That's worse than the money. And then obviously payment and other scams.
Yeah, and also sometimes on eBay, they will not list it with free local pickup, but I have had multiple times where I've asked them to change the listing to add free local pickup if I'm, local, and they will change the listing, and because it saves them the time and effort of shipping it, and you run over there if they're in the neighborhood and pick it up.
Yeah.
And then you know exactly what you're getting. So you can always ask. Doesn't cost you anything.
Doesn't cost you anything. And if somebody's going to be a jerk about it, you probably didn't want to go into the deal to begin with. So it goes to valuating things, right? Again, one of the easiest way to do it is eBay sold listings, but you talk to people. Talk to people here at VCF. You can look at auction house sales. There's a lot of, there's things like price charting too, which I don't really, price charting seems inflated to me. Worth point, yeah, they're just, prices are very inflated, especially if you're gonna sell things. I mean, maybe it's a good place to start, because people can always, ask you to, ask for making a deal, but I just, eBay sold listings are kind of, psychologically, it's kind of where the market is. So to me, it's the best place. Again, going back to what I said about maintaining your collection, if you want to value your stuff for eventual sale, definitely clean it up, catalog it, photograph it, periodically, make sure it's up to date. Not just for those reasons, but also potentially, God forbid, for insurance reasons, which he's going to go into as well, Jeremy will go into as well. Very important, right? If you want to get a good, a decent insurance settlement. Well, there you go, insurance. If you have a sizable collection, I would check your homeowners and policies for collectibles coverage. They just might see it as old, worthless electronics that, are worth pennies on the dollar. Check your dollar limits too for things like that to see if if you need a rider in your insurance to cover your collection. For me, personally, I didn't, but that insurance policies are all different across vendors, across states. Really, absolutely check with your homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance to see what's covered and how much.
You know, because even like a single item, like an Apple Lisa, would definitely merit listing in your insurance policy.
Yep. So, and if you wanted to get separate insurance for your collection, aside from your homeowner's insurance, there are places that'll do it. I saw some places that were about $90 a year for $10,000 of coverage. Your collection might be bigger, might be smaller, but if that's something you're interested in doing, then you can look for that and get it. But either way, right, whether it's for your homeowners or your renters or that, I would just, again, unless you have an idea of what you have and how much it's worth, you're kind of flying blind, and God forbid something happens, your collection gets wiped out, and then you're kind of starting from scratch. It's a shame.
Yeah, especially stuff that's made out of unobtainium.
Yeah.
Somebody in here knows.
Yep. Yeah, there's certain things in my collection that if I lost, I wouldn't even bother trying to get them back at this point. It's too heartbreaking. So now we come to the point where we've gone through the discovery phase, fun. The acquisition phase, doing all the work. Now, inevitably, sometimes we get to the getting out, whether it's you want to get out of it because you've lost interest or you don't have the time, or sadly, it's not voluntary. The old adage absolutely applies: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And again, this is where we're going to lead into the second part of this talk. But again, plan. Talk to your family, talk to your relatives, your friends, any user groups you belong to, museums, about the stuff you have, and about what might happen to it, the disposition of it if something happens to you. It's so important because, again, it's heartbreaking. We get calls to the museum all the time here, and about these collections that people had, and how many times we hear, "Oh, it's not out of here in 5 days; it's going in the dumpster." Right? It's a shame. The families don't always even know the extent of what the collections are or what's in them. Very important thing, again, we'll go more into it later, but having a legal last will and testament to make sure the disposition of your equipment happens according to what you want and not somebody else. The other thing is, is if you want to get out, surrendering your stuff. What are the different ways to do it? Well, there's selling, right, which could be profitable, but it definitely takes a lot of time. But there's another one of those things where if you planned ahead and you documented everything, it makes it much, much easier. And you feel better about selling it too, because you're getting what the stuff is actually worth, and it makes it easy to sell because you've got all the details. I notice when selling things of my own, the more details I have, the more photos I have, the quicker it sells. Donating is always an option, right? Especially if you've got a substantial dollar value amount of stuff, you can actually get, it could actually affect your taxes in a positive way. You give to a nonprofit, they should be able to give you a tax receipt for that reason. You could give your stuff away, right? Give it to people that it's going to go to a good home, that they'll appreciate it, take care of it, and pass it on to someone else when the time comes. And again, if you don't do any of this, beware of the dump, right? Because as much as your loved ones, appreciated you and your hobby, they don't know what to do with your stuff. It's going to end up in the garbage, which is a shame. So, seriously, we don't like to use the word hoarding, but it happens, and it happens in our hobby as well, just like anything else. I've seen it, and I've seen it to the point where it's made me sad, because it can take over your life. And it's not just about computer collecting, any collecting. It's if you feel like you have a problem, like seriously, talk to your friends, talk to family, talk to a professional. Being completely serious here. I don't mean to make light of it at all. It can be something that really harms people's lives.
Yeah, and if the guy that you talk to says, "Hold my beer," walk away.
Yeah. Oh, you think you got a big collection? Yeah, just Yeah, sometimes you have to do a little soul searching, right? And say, okay, am I really, have I overdone this now? Is there stuff in my collection I haven't even looked at in 3 years? And really just, you know, you can make sure it goes to the right home, right? You don't want to give it up because you spent all this time and effort and you don't want to see something bad happen to it. But yeah, if you care that much, then make sure it goes to the right place. So that's the end of my portion of this. Yes, sir.
Yes. Wait for the microphone.
Okay, now you.
Okay. How far do you go with restoring floppy drives as far as the belts? Do you know anything about availability of spare belts? What do you recommend as far as keeping them? You know, is it worth it to use an emulator? What's your thoughts on that?
So, okay, yeah, great question. So floppy drives, there are a lot of models where you still can get belts. Just do an eBay search or a Google search. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of them where you can still get belts that work. For some reason on floppy drives, the belts don't tend to go as bad like on old tape drives. You know, old, like you get an old reel-to-reel deck to work again. Really hard to find belts for those things, but floppy drives, yeah, a lot of times you can restore them. They're not really hard to, unless they're physically damaged, they're not hard to clean and realign, make sure all the parts work. The sensors, the track zero sensors, things like that, pretty easy to replace. Yeah, so they're easy to get going. Is it worth the effort? Well, yeah, if you have a lot of media that you
Actually, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
What's the durability of the media?
So the durability of media is really all over the place. Anybody that's here, that's been here for a while and knows this hobby knows that. You can get, I've got floppy disks literally from 1977 that are perfectly fine, perfectly readable, can reformat them and use them. I've got diskettes from the late 80s that are already falling apart. It depends on the quality of the media and how they were stored. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with media. I could spend an hour just talking about magnetic storage media and how it's built and why all the bad things can happen. But it's one of those things, I hate to say it, your mileage may vary. They could be fine, they could be rotten. It depends on the quality and how they were stored. And how they were written as well, right? The equipment they were written on. If something it was written on was a little bit out of whack to begin with, you're gonna have a hard time reading it on something else. All right, that's why it's important to adjust the tracking and the speed of your drives. But again, not hard to do if you're interested in it. Great, get it running, archive your stuff. For me personally, I don't spend a lot of time with it. I don't have a lot of stuff that I need to personally archive. Anything that I have that's on media, it's already been archived. It's more for fun, just to show people. Day-to-day use, I have solid state drives on pretty much everything I have now. That's possible to have. And that includes hard drives, especially hard drives. Because once they go, they can be brought up maybe once to get the data off them, but once you do the things necessary to get them back up and running, they're on borrowed time. And you're getting the data off and that's it, you're done. Put them on a solid state solution after that. Anything else?
Any other questions?
So then I'll turn it over to Justin.
All right. Next slide.
Spacebar. There you go.
So, the two things in life that are... Oh, go ahead.
If you don't speak to Michael.
No, I know. I'll do it now.
Recording will not get it, and people who are not here, we can't hear you, but they will be watching later without hearing
Oh,
you.
okay. I'll speak in the mic. So the two things in life that are certain are death and taxes. So I'll get into not the taxes part, but the death part. The people should be doing don't think much about is estate planning, especially the planning part. And it's really a disservice to the family members and everybody left behind when they just get dumped on them. And this will be the horror show part of the material where things have gone very wrong and after people have passed away. Oops, sorry. Where is it? So,
Oh, shoot, sorry.
So I'm not your lawyer. You should definitely, because everybody's case is different, talk to a qualified lawyer who does estate planning and can walk you through the ins and outs of it, because each situation is different. And no matter how small a fact, tell them, and they will definitely. Oh, even still can't hear? Okay. They'll definitely ask you questions about it, and especially if you have rare and obscure items, you definitely need to tell them about it so they are aware of it and they can plan accordingly. So as I went through it, estate has the word planning in it for a reason. Estate auctioneers are very unfamiliar with these areas. They know jewelry, furniture, things like the clothing, but a vintage computer, they almost always don't even think about what it is and couldn't recognize it. So family members, your kids aren't interested in it. It's all dad's junk in the basement that he tinkers with. They don't know any kind of, and it could be like an Apple One. It just, to the untrained eye, it looks like, an electronics project gone awry. But so as you mentioned before in the earlier slide, take a detailed inventory, especially for insurance purposes, if you have an insurance policy on it. Now, valuations are subjective, and I'll get on more of that later. But you do have at least, condition, what the item is, if there's anything special about it, like it was owned by a famous person, or, it's a low model number, what have you, then definitely document that. As I mentioned, some things are basically now made of unobtainium, so the insurance can't replace it because it could be 5 years before another one of that item comes up for sale. And you would just get the insured value on it, and they'd be lost forever. So what can go wrong? This was in Teaneck in 2017. People had a Rembrandt above their dining room for 58 years. No kidding. Sold it for $1 million, and their father, oddly enough, remember I told you about not knowing about these things? Their father was an art dealer. And he bought it, not knowing what it was in the 1930s, sat above the dining room for 58 years. He passes away, and it goes, like, the estate auctions that people show up at the house to bid on stuff? It went through one of those auctions. And then the phone calls started coming in from Germany and the Netherlands offering $800,000, $1 million at this estate sale in Teaneck. Yes, it does happen. Oh, he's the 20s, I'm sorry, I had the year wrong. So they basically kept a Rembrandt in the basement for years because they thought it was ugly. So there's an Apple One over in Section D, in case anybody hasn't seen it. One of the first ones ever made, by Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. Thank you. Somebody in San Francisco had one of the earlier ones, and they die, and they dumped it at a recycler. Now, I know everyone in this room is probably cringing. If anybody doesn't know this story, if they're just finding out about it now for the first time, they're probably cringing at this, but this happens. It happens more than you think. Now, the recyclers now know what to look for. If somebody drops an Apple Lisa in a recycler, they're going to jump all over it. But, actually in this story, that's exactly what happened. The recycler recognized what it was, and they actually published this article in the San Francisco Chronicle saying, whoever this lady was who dropped this off, come back. We want to give this back to you. And they actually did reunite it with the owner, after they passed away, or the wife of the owner. So final thoughts. I'm going to get into one specific story that also everybody in this room is well aware of. Any inventory you make, canon will be used against you in a court of law, not in a criminal courtroom, but in a divorce courtroom. Just to be aware of that. You guys might be, have a happy marriage now, but you never know. 10 years from now, she'll be like, you and those goddamn Apple computers. Obviously, detailed instructions are better than general ones. Please leave make sure you plan ahead. The donations to museums, yes, as long as they know about it, they can't just drop it on the family members and they show up on the museum's doorstep and say, here, my dad said to leave all his junk to you. And their first question is, who's your dad? And then you tell them and they're like, who's that? So they can, if they have a relationship with it, like us, like the guys who work with VCF, if we passed away, they know who we were. If we dropped but some random guy in Fairfield who just said, leave my stuff to the guys down in Wall who we met at VCF East 3 years ago, we're not gonna know. And if it's just a bunch of, Commodore 64s, big deal. So,
Yeah, but two other things with that also is one, sorry. Two other things with that also is not just like you said, dropping it off and we don't know who you are. It's having the resources for us to be able to do intake on it. That's one, the space. The other thing is too, we get a lot of calls from people wanting to donate things that are completely out of our scope, right? A bunch of HP Vectras and, Dell computers from their early O's, it's nothing we can do with those. So we have to send people away, and it's kind of a shame that people come to us at the last minute. Oh, what am I going to do with this? I don't know what to tell them. I don't want to tell them to take it to a recycler, but at the same time, we can't take it. Completely out of our scope. We don't have the resources to deal with things like that. So again, important to plan ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, and the last point, is the person you're leaving it to, are they going to outlive you? Or, are you leaving it to an 86-year-old with cancer, kind of thing, because he's the one person that in your life that would appreciate it. So you have to keep these things in mind. Make sure you tell the estate planning lawyer about this. So this actually isn't part of my presentation, but I will touch on this situation that I'm pretty much every one of you is aware of. And anybody want to guess which situation I'm thinking about right now? Paul Allen, yeah. Okay, I have never been so shocked, disappointed, and angry after reading the Paul Allen story, because it was completely preventable. So he had, I understand what happened, but the guy was so to give the people who don't understand, so Paul Allen was one of the co-founders of Microsoft. When he died, he was worth about $60 billion. And the Portland Trailblazers and 3 other sports teams and gobs, but he also amassed some of the most rare and unique history of computing going back to the 1950s, all in one place in Seattle. So he passed away from cancer a couple of years ago. And his instructions were to sell his collection at auction. And it was actually right over here across the river in New York. They sold his collection. So so when you sell a collection that's all together like that, generally there's only one reason you would do that, is because the family needs the money. Did Paul Allen's family need the money? No, they didn't. It was a rounding error on his estate, generally. He was worth $57 billion. I think the collection brought in $35 million. That's literally less than 0.5%. And the reason that it happened is because he let it happen. If he had told his lawyer, set up a foundation, we do this all the time. This is nothing new to us. We can do this. There's standard paperwork for it. No joke. It takes maybe an hour to do. You set up especially with something with that much money, he sets up a charitable foundation, he wills all those items to the charitable foundation and establishes the museum with an endowment, and the museum could run for 50 years on an endowment, and the remaining family members would not notice a difference. It would be cut off at the 4th decimal place for their inheritance. And they could have kept that collection together for decades in Seattle. That's why I'm so angry about this, because he could have done it like that with 10 minutes of instructions to his lawyer. And he didn't. And that's what happened. It got sold and it got spread to the 4 winds. So I will get off my soapbox now. But I just want to give you some context on how that happened and why it happened and how it was completely preventable. Full stop. It was preventable. So now that I've scared everybody into silence,
Well, usually I go around to get a question, but I'm going to ask the first question. Do you have any really strong feelings about that? Does anybody have? Oh.
I have something that you didn't even cover.
okay.
What do you do about the long-term longevity of your software collection? Now, I'm not talking about, let's say, these box video games. I personally have a massive collection of source code to thousands of vintage video games. And the way I'm solving my problem is that I have to deal with, like you talk about floppy disks, what medium do you put it on? Because the biggest problem is that every time there's a long-term storage medium, it gets obsoleted in 4 years.
Right.
Like tapes, people say back it up on tape. But in 4 years, that model tape drive doesn't make anymore, and then you're screwed. Currently, my solution is that I use M disks. Those
Blu-ray.
they're like the Blu-ray 90 gigabyte M disks. I burn everything on these disks, so therefore they will definitely expire long after I'm expired.
Yeah.
But of course, Sony in their infinite wisdom decided to stop production of Blu-ray players, so now I got to stock up on Blu-ray players so that at least 50 years from now I'll have something to read the medium, and that's just a never-ending frustration for me. Of course, in my will, I have all those bins of Blu-rays will end up at the Internet Archive, and then they can deal with it.
Right, right. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's frustrating, right? And I deal with archive myself too, not only with the museum, but with, my profession. We have to worry about, making sure that data is retained and preserved and is readable. And so the age-old dilemma is, like you're doing the right thing. You're putting your stuff on archival grade media, but the data will survive, but will there be a reader around to read it at some point? And that's always going to be the thing. I'll get to you in one second. It's my personal conclusion is that it needs to be spread across several different media, right? Cloud storage being one. I know even cloud's not really an answer because that can go away. Even the grand Google can go away someday, right? You're right. Yeah, it can go away. And again, you're doing the other right thing you're doing is saying, okay, good, and eventually end up at the Internet Archive. Awesome, right? Because they'll have several ways of doing that as well. But like I said, my best advice is to spread it around to different, at least a few different types of storage, permanent storage. Yes, please.
Well, I was just going to suggest that, with what we've seen with the Internet Archive, we're getting sued and taken down by hackers, and so I worry about the future of that. But the other thing that a person could potentially do is make torrents available of things that you want to make sure outlive you, software-wise, and share those torrent links on related forums. And there's a Reddit group called Data Hoarders, and a lot of these people, are obsessed with just basically doing what libraries do with data. So the more chances you give it, like daffodil, what are they called? What are the yellow flowers? When they take wing, the dandelion.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Spread it to
Send it to the four winds. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, great advice. Yeah.
It's only for software that you can legally distribute.
Right. Well, yeah. Good point.
Be careful about those copyright laws.
Yeah, and stuff that you can't legally distribute. Well, you again archive it anyway.
My solution, GitHub. Put it up on GitHub.
Oh, GitHub.
Then lay in as well.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, GitHub's it's a pain in the ass to use, but it's a good solution for putting stuff up.
Hi.
GitLab.
Are we another question?
Yes. So you may have already addressed this, but as we know, it's easy for the hobby to spiral out of control, and you develop tunnel vision. If you just get one more item, you'll complete the collection. Yeah. But how do you go about putting limits, I suppose, so that it doesn't get to that point of hoarding, interfering with your life, that kind of thing? What would you suggest for limits?
So in the early part of the presentation, I mentioned about different, what is your goal? What are the things you're interested in? If you really want to, if you're conscious about wanting to set limits, try to limit what you're getting to a specific area, right? Like I said, a vendor. I only collect Apple. I only collect Apple from 1977 to 1990, or I only collect 8-bit micros, or things like that, or limited to consumer machines or something. Try to think about what it is you're really interested in and what you're really liable to play with, tinker with, be interested in maintaining. All of it's interesting. I love all technology, no matter what it is, computer technology or not, but I can't have it all, right? And I'm learning now, later now that I'm on the other side of the collecting. Now I'm at the part where I'm trying to pare down and get rid of things. I'm giving a lot of hard thought about what is going to be on my racks that I will actually walk up to and use. And you can think about that ahead of time. It doesn't have to be afterwards. And I think if you do that, if you give that enough thought, you'll have the discipline to kind of maintain a manageable collection.
Any additional questions?
Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Rush shirt.
Always fun.
How do you start building the relationships with museums and auction houses and things in advance? Do you just kind of send them a list and say, you want any of this? Or, yeah.
So what you said right after museums? What was the other?
Auction houses, museums, like that sort of, yeah.
Well, an auction house will take anything if they can sell it. They make their commission. What do they care?
Yeah.
But that being said, there are auction houses that specialize in certain items that would definitely be a better bet, especially if it's rare. Or I forgot the guy that died in California with like 50 Apple prototypes in his house that were one of one basically, and things like that. But I guess most of you guys aren't former Apple employees that walked off with one-use prototypes. But that does happen. You could have something that you didn't realize is valuable, and like a Saul or one of those things that that. And also, speaking of value, so as an estate planning lawyer, we have a saying that says valuation follows demographics. And what that means is what's popular now and high priced now is generally based on the generation that collects it. So if you look at something like 60s era muscle cars right now, they are absolutely tanking in value. Why? Because the age of the people that collect them are now dying off, and the people who are younger, they have no reference on a 69 Chevelle, 4x4, 454, and they want a Grand National GNX. So one will fall, one falls in value and the other one raises in value. And especially with baby boomers, there's a huge demographic that's dying off now. So things that baby boomers collect are not collectible by the following generation. So what you valued it 10 years ago is not the value today. And it can go up in some cases and it can also go down in some cases. So that being, just keep that as in your mindset as far as, if you're a part of a large demographic that collects, 70s and early 80s microcomputers like a compact portable. In 10 years, the people who are going to be in collecting age, late 40s to early 60s, they're not going to collect a compact portable because it was out before they were born. But they will collect, I don't know, make something up, like a Sega NES or a Super Nintendo limited edition or an Xbox, actually the Xbox with all the weird graphics on them that are very rare, they're very collectible. For somebody, but you go to a 70-year-old and try to make them buy a Microsoft Xbox with like gear, with the special graphics from like
Gears of
Call of Duty. They're gonna look at you like you have three heads. So
And the video game market especially is fickle, very fickle. That definitely goes by demographics, because we've seen things like the GameCube is a great example. It goes up and down in value based on demographics. You know, if you've seen that happen. So it's, yeah, it's definitely a thing. Yes.
Yeah, I have a comment and a kind of a question maybe you guys can expand on. I can recall as far back as like the 80s and 90s learning about magnetic media and how it can die. I mean, literally die from just sitting around. You had talked a little bit earlier about that, but what are your recommendations? Years ago, we would...
Well,
As far as preserving it, you mean? or-
Preserving. We would rewrite a floppy, copy a floppy to a new floppy and kind of start over and have
Yes,
that refresh.
so, well,
But
yeah,
now
but-
floppies are disappearing and
Right.
Well, think about how many, if a 10 megabyte hard drive, they haven't made those in 30 years, and, those go bad, there's an ever shrinking supply. So, especially with media, because I'm 55 years old, so the media in my lifetime has gone from like the drum he was talking about in the previous presentation, with the iron cores and, with the Apollo moon landing, to like SSD drives that, are 1 million times more dense than something happened when I was born. So, and the hardware that was popular 20 years ago has stopped being manufactured, like CD drives. So anything on a CD in 50 years, you can have the CD will still be around and it will still be readable. Whether you can find a CD-ROM to read it is another story. Because
Yeah.
they've stopped including it with computers. So, actually, is there a computer sold today that has a CD-ROM? I can't think of one.
Just game consoles.
Okay, so yeah, but it's dwindling, and a few years from now they're going to be gone, and maybe you'll get externals. So fast forward 25 years, reading a CD-ROM, CD is not going to be an easy task.
I actually have a small solution for that problem, is that in all my vintage computers that I acquire, the first thing I do is I image the drive into an ISO, and then I burn that ISO on one of those M disks, so that at least the data is preserved forever. And then in reverse, I get either a blue SCSI or one of those IDE SD cards, and then just put the ISO back on there, and essentially I preserve the drive.
Right, yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of things with that, right? The data, sometimes the data is just the data, and you get it off the media, get it into whatever other kind of format you can get it. That's fine. To Becky's point, when the structure of the data is important, maybe like a CD, an ISO image for a CD. Maybe it's important to the recovery of the information. Copy-protected diskettes, that's another one. The actual, format of the data on the diskette was very important to preserve that information. Yeah, you create a disk image. Perfect. Now, you don't necessarily have to recreate the media to get the data back, but there's a lot of emulators that can actually read those formats and present the data to the computer exactly if it was coming from a physical piece of media. So thank you for that. Yeah, not just copying the data, but also disk imaging, extremely important. Not so much for hard drives. To image a hard drive is not really necessary. I might be wrong. I don't know of any hard drive format in the past or now that it would be important to preserve the physical structure of the disk.
It's like Amiga format or a ProDOS format, which is unreadable by modern machines on the ISO, and then you can use a tool to get the data out of it or image it to a drive into the real machine.
Right. So yeah, Becky's, in case nobody heard, people didn't hear that or on the camera. Yeah, things in certain DOS formats, ProDOS, things like that were semi-proprietary. Again, and even if it came off a hard drive or whatever, important to have it in an image so that it can be recovered properly, have all the proper file attributes. To reconstruct the data properly. So thank you for that question. That was very good, and thanks for the follow-up. Yeah. Yep.
I was wondering if part of the question was actually using the floppies as part of your experience, and how do you preserve that experience, being able to actually put a floppy disk in the computer and get the software to come up, write your game or your document, whatever, and then put it back on floppy. Now, that's something that we experienced 40 years ago, but if a youngster is going to go buy a 5150 and try to resurrect that 360K floppy drive and wants to experience that whole thing, that's getting harder and harder. What I do is I put all of those images on an XTIDE, and that goes in the machine, so I can at least experience the using of the software. But I don't know how we're going to preserve the actual floppy. I think that's probably going to go away someday. And then we have the GoTech, and we have a lot of other devices. If you were into Apple, you can buy these cartridges or SCSI things that will do the same thing. And if you're in Commodore, you can get cartridge upgrades that give you all sorts of software on this little SD card, all that stuff. So that's all great. We can still experience the software, but I think we're probably going to lose the floppy.
So, yeah, I mean, to your point about preserving the experience, the only way to preserve the experience is to have the actual hardware, sadly. Right? Unfortunately, no one's ever going to know exactly what it was like to use the ancient Greek Antikythera mechanism, because there's not one that's complete as far as we know, right? And how to use it. It's just, a fact of life, unfortunately. One day, the last working floppy drive will break, unless somebody tries to, make physical recreation of them. Same thing with CRTs, right? CRTs present a unique viewing experience, and there's no LCD that's ever going to, well, I don't know ever, but that can duplicate that. And that's going to disappear too. The most we can do is, people have done, really smart people have done a great job at preserving the physical disk formats in electronic form, so that they can be fully recreated if you have a working drive. But I think even if the drives disappear, it's still important. So in the future, people have an understanding of how these things worked. Even if you don't have the drive itself, you can derive from the format, okay, what was needed? How did this thing work? How did it get the data off? Preservation of these things. Like I said, for personal collectors, for us, depending on the amount of time, effort you want to use, solid state stuff is great because at least it lets you preserve the software and experience it. Thankfully, there's people around that are very good at repairing old drives.
And reverse engineering, the reverse engineering the operating systems, the sectors and track sizes, that kind of thing. With the non-standard formats or proprietary formats, where they were able to reverse engineer them and can read those disks that were never able to be read before. So there is a sizable community that does this. I mean, granted, some stuff they still haven't cracked, but it's come light years from where it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, the applesauce is an amazing device, right? It's gone way beyond doing complete image copies of Apple disks. Right? It can do other formats as well now. And it gets the entire copy protection and all. Amazing. So that Grease Weasel, Grease Weasel. Amazing. So those are the things that are going to help keep this knowledge going forward in the future. I think inevitably just the physical drives are going to, sadly, they'll disappear, and you're not going to get that satisfying experience of closing the drive door and hearing that, right?
Well, another point is that
Speaking of XTIDE and just copying things, preserving on flash media, what is the life expectancy of that? Because I've had some SD cards that, some pictures that I've took my kid, she's off in college now, but when she was little, I'm like, okay, some of these are coming back and half the picture is just,
gibberish, files are getting lost already.
So with solid state media, that type, the flash media, they're generally rated in read-write cycles, right? They're a lifetime. That's not always the bottom line, though, right? Sometimes they'll go beyond, sometimes they'll fail before that. But I think that stops, just read-write cycles kind of stop short of the concern. How is that data going to be preserved over time? You could write that thing once, verify it, stick it in somewhere safe. What's going to happen in 500 years from now? Are those domains still going to be read properly? That I don't know, right? And I think it's like anything else. The best you can do is environmentally try to keep it as safe as possible.
Yeah, was it exposed to heat, humidity, things, environmental factors that are completely out of control?
Radiation, things like that. Especially whether it's like any kind of electromagnetic radiation, obviously.
Like
To me, though,
it could be stored next to a tube TV and wipe it out because the tube's putting a magnetic field over it.
right? Yeah. So I mean, again, I personally don't consider that type of storage as archival. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, that goes back to the physical media because the reason I chose MDisk was that I did analysis of all the different media, which included flash. The problem with flash is that it has to be electrified at least once every 3 months to maintain its veracity. Otherwise, if it has no electrical power attached to it for about 2 years, you have a 10% chance of data loss.
Yep.
So therefore, is that there's a big problem right now with Nintendo 3DS and DSi cartridges because they're now dying because people get a 3DS, get their cartridges, put their video game away, play it 10 years later, and notice half their cartridges don't work because they need to plug them in, give them some power to basically refresh what's
the
inside.
domains, yeah.
Otherwise, that's a big problem with flash media. If the flash media is inside of a machine that's always on, like your phone or your computer, it's not a problem because you're always electrifying it.
Right.
But if it's stored, that's an issue.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And also an answer to an earlier question about the floppy experience is that floppy physical media, because it's physically touched, wears out. There's nothing we can do about it. Every time you use that floppy, the physical floppy, you're aging it, and it eventually will die just because of use. And because the last floppy manufacturing factory shut down, 5-10 years ago?
Like 2017, yeah.
Yeah, 2017, so it's, 8 years ago. We're on borrowed time. So unless somebody's out there got a couple $1 million who's willing to tool up a factory and make some more new product, we're doomed.
Right. Yep. Okay.
I got a question in the back again, sorry.
Thanks, Becky.
And also, if a CD drive goes bad, you can still use it for its intended purpose as a cup holder.
That old gag.
Well, no, I did that joke to my niece who's like 24, and she looked at me like I was speaking in hieroglyphics, But then again, I also played a joke on her. This is always one for the ages. Hide their phone and then give them a rotary dial phone to try to find it.
So we have a question in the back, and then we'll get.
So we got a question here, and then we'll come to you.
Comment on the question, with the original experience, contemporary video photography is still really interesting. So maybe videotaping the speed and the noises and the operation could be a useful artifact for the future. The question was, what is the best kind of channel and method to maximize return when divesting some of this stuff? Like if you're selling something, what have you found works in terms of where to sell it, how to list it?
So you talk about storage devices in general, or anything?
Just like selling any high value collectible.
Okay. So yeah. Again, I'll go from personal experience and buying and selling. Right. Document the crap out of it. The more information you put about something you have for sale, the faster someone will buy it. People want to think about yourself, right? If you're buying a car, something high value item, the more you know about it, the better you feel about buying it. I will put on an eBay listing, I will put as many pictures as they allow me to put, and I will highlight any flaws purposely because I want full disclosure of what, the condition, what it's about, what it looks like, what it is, down to the serial number, everything. I just feel like when people, and stuff just bang, it goes. Again, right, think about yourself buying something. You feel much better about it if you know what condition it's in. The more you can do to make it work, the better, obviously. If it's clean, that's very important. Right? It has nothing to do with the operation of it, but it's perception. Right? It's been taken care of. So that would be my advice. You want to maximize the value of the things you're selling, clean, repair it as much as you can, and be very honest about the condition and very open about it.
A couple things. One I wanted to add is you don't just give them a rotary phone. You have to set them in front of a television that's got dials on it, and you have to leave the directions in cursive. But I mean, if you're going to go,
Revenge of the Boomers.
you got to go. You don't half-ass it. You go in with both cheeks. But I think it kind of touches on when we talk about the archiving, whether it's photos left on an SD card or a mini flash or one of those, or M discs, which I'd heard of, but also one of those things that looks like it's rare. I mean, they've shut down floppies. Soon they'll shut down the CD media because no one's going to use that. And really, there aren't really a whole lot of other options on the horizon, short of running a NAS and say, oh, well, now we've got 16 terabyte drives. Now got to go in and replace all 8 and have them rebuild.
Yeah, actually bring about something else. It's somewhat related to magnetic media, but one that is like my personal mission in life is proprietary keyboards. And where I should not use this term, but the keyboard people, I will use a different term. I would use a different term that I won't use here, but where they split up the keyboard from the machine and render the machine basically e-waste because they thought the keyboard would look nice in their collection. And so I think I just did a question over there, but yeah, it happens with old terminals. Some of the Tandys have proprietaries where the stuff is basically junk after that because there's no keyboards for it. Yeah. And yes, you could, if there was enough of a market for it, you probably could, build an adapter to do like a PS2, generic PS2, which or USB to that keyboard format. But that definitely is a problem with some retro machines where the keyboards are made out of unobtainium and there's no telling what happened to them, especially the mechanical ones.
And let me just address the second part of this question before we get to you. So yeah, as far as the way media changes and what do you do, right? So if anybody hears, if you work in commercial IT at all, you deal with backups, right? So you know that backup media changes, and generally what'll happen is they'll make the tapes backward compatible, read, I think on the drives they'll make it 10 years, something like that, or 3 generations, and then write, they'll leave it for like 5, or I might have that backwards, but the problem is eventually the drives change enough where they won't read old media anymore or write old media. So you get in the habit of doing is if you have stuff that you need to have archived for longer, you either put it on a longer term archival media, like with the M discs, 50 years, 100 years, or you cycle the media, right? Which is a big pain, but it's one of the best ways to do it. It does that accomplishes 2 things. It takes your data from the old storage media to the new, right? So it lets you breathe a little longer. The other thing it does is it actually serves to refresh your data. I've read it, I've verified it, I know it's still good. So I can say now I still have a valid copy X amount of years later. And that's really important in, especially things like regulated industries where you need to hold on to this stuff by law. But the lesson applies regardless, right? If sometimes the only solution is to cycle your media. If you've got 8mm videotapes of your kids from when they were little, you better start thinking about getting that stuff onto something else, because I can still go to a garage sale, pick up an old 8mm camcorder and get the stuff off. How much longer am I going to be able to do that? right? Those old videotape formats, especially the tiny ones, right? They're going away. You can still go out and get, VCRs, used, cheap to convert that stuff. Again, that's going to go away too. So, yeah, the best advice I can give on that is just upcycle the media, upcycle the information to new media every so often.
Actually, my question segues off of that. I'm wondering what sort of archival options might just be media agnostic, like if you have source code.
Paper.
Yeah, paper, laminated, or even carve it into stone or whatever.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. So like it might be painstaking to reconstruct, and it won't be tied to the media, but it's potentially even future proof beyond any specific mechanism. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So future proof, it's hard to say, right? Because things change all the time. How do we know? You think something, this is very futuristic. IBM's been working on holographic storage since the 80s, right? I haven't seen it yet. The problem is what is it? Reading it is lightning quick. Writing it is painstakingly slow, right? But even then, maybe you consider, maybe that's so-called permanent because you would actually have to physically smash it, destroy it to get rid of the data. But then it comes back to what you said. Again, what are you going to use to read it? Yeah, some brilliant person in the future will puzzle it out and figure it out and maybe be able to get the data off. But you're always going to have that dilemma. As close to permanent as a solution might be, reading it back is always going to be.
Gutenberg's invention is still relevant today. Gutenberg's invention is still relevant today.
That's why I half jokingly only said paper because right, you can restore Gutenberg press and print the paper today as well as you could 400 years ago. So, but even then that's not permanent, right? It's ink on paper. It's ephemeral. You think about it. Not wanting me to get philosophical, but everything's ephemeral. You think about it, right? Nothing lasts forever. The universe is chaos, and it's all going to dissolve into, what do you call it? Yes, exactly. There you go. That's it. So let's think about within our lifetime, within maybe several lifetimes, to think about the future, and again, knowing that the only universal constant is change. Knowing that, deal with it in that way.
I have an example of that. In 1960s, there was a computer called an IBM 1130. They have one for the museum that is actually being repaired right now. And on that computer, a language called Forth. Anybody ever heard of Forth?
Right.
Okay. Sure. A language called Forth was invented on that computer, and it's called Forth because that computer only had 5-character file names. So it was supposed to be F-O-U-R-T-H, but that's why it's Forth. Okay. So beside the point. So back in like 2011 or so, I wrote a letter to the guy who invented Forth, Charles Moore. And I asked, because I'm an 1130 enthusiast, and I asked him, do you by any chance have any leftover 1130 Forth stuff? And he said, I don't think so, but I'll look through, and if I find something, I'll send it to you. In 2018, the guy who works on 1130s, Carl Claunch, got in touch with me and said, hey, Bob, do you have any of the 1130 stuff that Charles Moore sent to you? And I said, what? I looked back through my email, and he sent me scans of the original source code for Forth, a pre-working version, but it was very close to working. And we mostly got it working on the emulator for the 1130. So actually, in some ways, paper may be one of the best ways, certainly for source code, of keeping something beyond something like GitHub or something like that. But just an example. I got another question.
Make it a PDF because Adobe might not be around all the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point though, because think about when magnetic media was first created, it was never meant to be archival. It was always going to be, it was always temporary, for temporary storage, right? Whether temporary meant 1 day or 5 years, it's not permanent, right? So, and magnetic media is still rated in that way for hours of use. So, yeah, good point about paper.
So one comment and one question. My comment is, if you're not backing up your information in two very distinct different locations, you're basically not backing it up. So if you don't have a cloud backup, or if you don't pass it off to a daughter, in another state where the same tornado can't take both of you out, type of process, you're still running the risk of just completely losing everything.
Geographic diversity is what
Yes.
we call it, yeah.
The question that I have for you, though, I personally collect Kpro machines, and I do research on Kpro machines. So I have the whole variety of common Kpros, all the way back to like very, very low serial numbers. And I remember as a kid, you would talk about, car collectors, and these are number matching machines, or these are all original machines. At what point do you go, I'm not even going to touch that machine that's in my collection? I'm not going to try to bring it back up. I'm not going to try to do anything with it, as opposed to all the way to the far end. I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to mod it. I'm willing to, put an AV jack on something that, requires me to cut through the case. Where are those levels for you guys?
The number of production units would be a start.
Yeah.
That'd be my first thing. Was it one of 50 or 800 or one of 8 million?
Right. Yeah. I've got some thoughts on both ends of that. Similar to what you're saying. Yeah, look at the rarity, right? Look, at the end of the day, you own it, it's yours, do what you want with it. But as a responsible collector, I'm going to say, then you look at the rarity. How much do you really want to do to it? But on the other end of that spectrum, just sealing it away and not turning it on ever, that's just as bad. If you get to that point, maybe you're better off giving it to a museum or to an enthusiast who's actually going to use it, right? It is important every once in a while, these old electronics with the capacitors, turn them on every once in a while, make sure, everything comes up. And
car collecting, you have to turn the engine over every so often to keep it, so it doesn't seize up. Same thing with electronics.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a middle ground where it's very important to use it, and then, like you said, if something that's rare, that's significant, preserve it as much as possible. I remember about 10 years ago, there was a big spate of people talking about, I'm doing this mod to my Commodore 64. The modding scene was crazy. People were just doing all kinds of crazy stuff to them and modding the cases. And some people were like, hey, why are you doing that? You're going to regret that someday. There's millions of these things around. Oh, there's so many. And there were. Not so much anymore. And we knew it was going to come to that day. My opinion was, okay, you go ahead and you cut your case, do whatever. I'm leaving mine alone. And in 20 years, when there's 5 of them left, I'll have one that's unmodded. So that's the kind of thing you have to think about. I mean, if there's certain Kpros that are kind of very common, right? And if there's something like in a situation where you have an exhibit or in a museum where to make it more displayable and usable, if you want to make it interactive, yeah, maybe you put a GoTech into it because the floppy drives aren't as reliable, and it makes it frustrating for people. But you want to have at least one so people get the experience. Things like that, I think, are okay. But like you said, a low original, first model, low serial number, yeah, you want to keep that for posterity as close as possible. And again, not to the point where it's behind glass, but once in a while, bring it up. Make sure it's good, right? Make sure it's okay. Make sure that the capacitors stay formed as well as possible. Very important. And that the drive mechanisms stay loose. So
And also with the CRTs, though, once they go bad with the mask, like there's no they can't be recovered.
Yeah. So CRT is a different thing. They have amount of hours that they're rated for, powered on hours, and that's something you want to consider. They do need to be turned on as well, just like any other electronics, but I don't like leaving them on for extended periods for no reason.
Yeah, and they don't make the tubes anymore.
Right, so that's it. Once the tubes are gone, the electronics can be fine, but tubes are, that's it. They're on the endangered species list.
Any other questions?
Well, then give it up for.
Oh, wait, we have one in the back. So.
Then hold that applause, please. Thank you.
If there was any.
We're trying to go to lunch.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Hi, I have another sort of general open question. What's your policy on recapping? Do you first look at the caps to see if they're bulging out and replace only those? You replace all the tantalums, or what's?
Yeah, there's a big debate about that. Some people are ready to go in and, oh, no, first thing you do, just recap it. No, I mean, my opinion, no. It's so easy to check for bad caps. You get an ESR meter. You don't even need you can use a regular meter too. An ESR meter makes it easier. Yeah, look for bad caps. Obviously, like you said, visual inspection, you can feel them. And yeah, replace the ones that are bad.
What does VRIFA stand for again?
I forget, but yeah, no, but those are going to blow. But yeah, I mean, at least RIFA caps, you can cut them out and still use it, right? You don't have to replace it right away. Maybe RIFAs are the one thing I'd say that you might want to just go ahead and preemptively replace, especially if they're old and they're looking kind of brown, so you don't get the, that surprise, you get the magic smoke letting out. It doesn't make anybody happy, but anything else, the problem is the more you mess with the board, the more risk you're taking, right? Why mess with stuff if you don't have to? And it's only that one era where the caps are really that bad. I mean,
Isn't it 2002?
I've got an Apple II from 1977, got all original components on it. It's perfect. It doesn't need a recap. Why would I touch it? So that's my opinion.
There's a YouTube video that was published literally like 2 weeks ago about 1 year where all the capacitors were bad. I think it was 2002. It's Easonometry is the channel. I don't know. You can look it up.
And then the 90s, it was with Nichicon, or I don't remember the capacitors that were. There was capacitors in the 90s that were used in a lot of game consoles, and I think there's certain Amigas where they're almost guaranteed to be bad now. But again, even then, right? I mean, to the point, if you, I'd say look on eBay, right? You type in capacitor kit. If there's a system that has a capacitor kit available for it, probably it's worth getting one just to have on hand, because you're probably going to need to recap the system. There's a lot of video game consoles from the 90s that have those available. The Sega, what's that? Oh, the Game Gear. Yeah, that, notorious for having bad caps. Easy to fix. The Genesis needs to be, there's cap kits you can buy for that. Again, easy to do. And even if it still works, sometimes we see certain things are off. The sound, the video, you recap them, works like new. But again, that's an exception for those types of systems that were prone to capacitor failure.
Any other questions? Okay, now it's time. Give it up for Dean Notardica.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.